You know, I can't count the times that I have saw headlines and said to myself, that has to be satire. There's no way that can be real. That's why I always go in and I research and I dig a little bit before I react to certain stories that I read, because they're so over the top and they're so crazy that you say to yourself, there's no way this actually got said. No one was ever this stupid to say this, or no one was ever this vain and pretentious to say something like this. But here we are. I saw a headline where Donald Trump Jr. asked that his courtroom sketch be sexy. He said, make me look sexy in my courtroom sketch. This is a guy who is on trial for fraud. His whole family is on trial for fraud, and he's concerned about how his artist sketch in the courtroom is going to look, and he wants to look sexy. And he actually referred them to another sketch and said, make me look like him. And they had to tell him, well, that's AI. I guess we'll do the best we can with you. But that's his main concern. That tells you just how vain and pretentious and fake and phony and plastic these people really are. And for the life of me, I will never understand how people that I grew up with right here in Appalachia, that I live amongst right here on the eastern Tennessee, eastern Kentucky border, how those people looked at these lifestyles and rich and famous Trumps and relates to them. You know, I could so see it. Let's just say that Hank Williams Jr. was Donald Trump. Okay, play along for a minute. Just replace Donald Trump with Hank Williams Jr. and let's say Hank Williams Jr. got elected and did the exact same thing. It was just Hank Jr. instead of Donald Trump. I could see why people in this part of the world would get behind Hank Williams Jr. because he's pretty damn big around here. So I could see that, and I could see them going into his catalog of songs like Country Boy Can Survive. And finding all the videos of him out on the lake fishing and hunting and all this. And I could say, yeah, I could see where rednecks will get behind this. But for the life of me, I will never understand how they got behind these phony plastic people, these spoiled brats who are on trial for fraud. And their biggest concern is, I hope my artist sketch looks sexy. I hope I look good in my artist sketch. That shows you that he doesn't take this serious at all. Or he's just trying to put on some sort of bravado to hide the fact that he's scared shitless. It's one or the other. But I kind of have a hot take on Don Jr., and I want y'all to hear me out on this one. And I also want you to go to the Midas Touch Network and find the interview where Michael Cohen, who is the lawyer who went to prison for Trump, go find where Michael Cohen interviewed Aubrey O'Day. Now, Aubrey O'Day is someone who Don Jr. had an affair with. And she reveals the secrets of that affair. And as she's sitting there talking about Don Jr., I start seeing him in a little bit of a different light. I start realizing, you know what? This is a guy who, at this point, is just in so deep with his dad that there's nothing more that he can do except play along and try to do his best Dollar General impression, talk with the hands and all this crap, and try to sound as much like him as he can and hope maybe he can continue to cash in on the grift. But if you listen to her talk about Don Jr., you know, at first he rebelled against his dad. He went to Colorado and became a bartender. And while he was out there, Senior sent him word that if you don't come back and work for the organization, if you don't come back here, you've got the name, you've got a spot, you've got the money. If you don't come back, I'm cutting you out of all of it. You won't have a spot here, you will have nothing. So he came back home. But when Aubrey asked him why he went out there and became a bartender, his exact words was, because fuck my dad. So at the end of the day, you know, you got to realize that Don Jr., Eric, Ivanka, all these, they were born into this. They were born with that name, whether they wanted to be or not. That's the hand they were dealt in this world. And if Don Jr. ever had that rebellious streak in him, it's still there. Or he still reminisces about that rebellious time in his life. And as he's sitting there saying, make me look sexy, in the back of his mind, somewhere in the back corner, is probably a guy that's also saying, fuck my dad. Because he realizes what his dad got him into. But she goes on to talk about the affair, and she talks about how that she met him on the show Celebrity Apprentice. And they started hitting it off real good. You know, they really hit it off. And then what was really interesting to me is she talks about how that the first time they ever had sex was in a gay nightclub. And she talks about how that she was a bleeding heart liberal. She's a big-time activist, always has been. He knew that about her. And she said that she fell in love with him. And she loved him because he was a good guy who didn't act nothing like you see him acting today. And she said that when she invited him to this gay nightclub, that she says to herself, he'll never show up here. There's no way he'll show. But not only did he show, he showed up. He was really nice to everybody around him, treated everyone with respect, and then had sex with her in the bathroom. So, again, if he ever had that type of rebellious streak in him, somewhere in the back of his mind is still there, and somewhere in the back of his mind he has to be saying, fuck not my dad. Now, listen, I am not condemning Don Jr. for having an affair, okay? I'm not throwing stones at him for having an affair. I'm not throwing stones at him for going to a gay nightclub or having sex at a gay nightclub. I could care less about any of that. I couldn't care less about any of those things. I'm not here to pass judgment on him for those things at all. But what I will say is these are the people that the evangelicals tell us we have to act like. And I can't count the times that I have to sit here and defend myself because on a daily basis, someone chimes in to say, Brando attacks Christians. Brando attacks believers. And I'm like, look, I'm attacking hypocrisy. And when I'm told that this family is the standard bearer of Christianity, and that's what we're supposed to live up to, and then Don Jr. goes on his Instagram and makes these homophobic style posts and says homophobic style things, but when he wanted to hook up, he had no problem going to that club and hanging out. He had no problem treating people with respect when there was something there that he wanted. That shows me a hypocrite. That shows me hypocrisy. That shows me absolute bullshit. And if you are a believer in Jesus Christ, then I highly encourage you read the book. Don't just sit there and listen to your preacher talk, because there is constant passages about people who in the last days will deceive you by acting as though they're like Christ, and they're not. That's one of the main themes of the book. So when I see people telling me that we should be more like the Trumps and they're the face of Christianity, that is absolute bullshit. I'm not casting stones on Don Jr. for anything that he did in his past or whatever. I don't care about none of that. I care about what he is now and what he's doing now. And what he's doing now is riding off the coattail of his dad, and he's a grifter, he's a con man, and he will spew any sort of racism, any sort of bigotry, any sort of homophobia that he can spew. He will do it all day long because he's going to continue to try to ride on that coattail. Now, somewhere in the back corner of his mind, he may be saying, fuck my dad, but it's too little too late for Don Jr.